gathering here today to protest the federal government's decision to appeal the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling regarding compensation for First Nations children who've been taken by the child welfare system.
And so this tribunal ruling, specifically released September the 9th, ruled that First Nations children who had been separated by the child welfare system were entitled to $40,000 in reparations to be decided upon between the federal government and Cindy Blackstock's organization.
These aren't just numbers on a fact sheet. These are kids who aren't getting their childhoods back. These are kids who are spending nights, years away from their parents, their cultures, just because the federal government doesn't think they're worth the money.
It wasn't largely spoken about in the campaign, which was quite disappointing in my opinion. Even when the federal government decided to appeal, there wasn't this broader discussion about what the appeal ruling meant within the confines of an election about the importance of the ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal.
The TRCs came out a couple of years ago and they were supposed to be implemented, and when Trudeau came into power he said he was going to implement them, all 94 of them. He's done 10. The government doesn't care about us. The fact that all these recommendations have been put forward and no one is doing anything about it speaks volumes. So what are you going to do about it?
We need to consider the facts behind why the federal government deems First Nations families unfit to take care of their own kids. We think about the lack of access to social services like medical care, infrastructure, education. Lack of funding to those services on reserve a lot of times lead to difficulties in these families providing essential care to First Nations kids.
To place this battle, to place this severe trauma onto Indigenous children, we're already grappling with so many other issues than finances. You know, we're people who are struggling to maintain our language, our heritage, our customs, and to put this like trivial item on us when we have so many bigger things to focus on, you know, it really hurts me.
In addition, a lot of the times us as First Nations peoples are struggling with intergenerational effects of things like the residential school system, 60s scoop, neo-colonial policies like the Indian Act, which a lot of times limit our ability to function as to what the federal government deems as a fit family to take care of First Nations kids. Once deemed unfit, the federal government, instead of applying adequate funds to social services on reserve, they decide to take those kids from community, they displace them from their language, their territory, their family, put them into these homes of non-Indigenous people where they have access to none of that. This terrible, this scary new environment where they can't really rely on any of the teaching that they've been brought up until that point.
My mother went to residential school, and because of her experience at residential school, I ended up being part of the 60s group and being taken far away from my community and brought here in Montreal, where I was forced to grow up in a culture that wasn't mine and to be ashamed of my culture. And that was incredibly difficult, but for whatever reason I was able to find that strength to go back and find my roots and get my Indian status back and get my education, and then applying it by trying to change the systems that exist for Aboriginal people here in Montreal.
Over 50,000 kids have been affected by this tribunal ruling who have been separated since January 1st, 2006. That's more kids in the child welfare system now than at the height of the residential school system. More kids displaced from their language, tradition, and families. And just think about our own childhoods and how much that meant to us. We think about this in their terms as lived experiences, you know, lived childhoods. For the federal government to say $40,000 is too much for their childhood. I mean, you're putting a number on them now. I honestly think $40,000 isn't enough if you think about the amount of money that's invested in our education, in our healthcare, in our infrastructure, the amount of money that's been invested in non-Indigenous kids living off reserve. In addition to the trauma that they've now had to deal with by being displaced by their families, I mean, the number is insulting, and that doesn't even cover the actual human emotion, the human damage that's been done to these kids.